So, an idea appeared in my mind the other day to revisit some aspects of Thoughts Are Things, a book by Prentice Mulford, initially published in 1908. That year, there was a number of wonderful books released, including The Kybalion by the Three Initiates. So when it comes to seeing thoughts as things, I recommend considering ideal thoughts as things, to give life to what you consider ideal, as then there would be no worry of identifying with thoughts that are not ideal. Today we discuss the ideas of ideal thoughts as things, thought forms, and thought entities. Prentice Mulford says, "Holiness implies wholeness, or whole action of the spirit on the body, or perfect control by your spirit over a body, through knowledge and faith in our capacity to draw ever more and more from the supreme power." So all ideal thoughts which appear in the mind of the individual that appears originate from the all-mind, the wholeness, the source of it all. And from this heart of reality, which is the supreme power, all that appears originate from. So something worth meditating on here is holiness actually implies wholeness. As we always say, you are whole and complete now. And from this premise, you have a free, calm, peaceful mind, thus to be able to receive within the ideal thoughts allowed to be manifested for you. Seek first the kingdom, and all these things shall be added unto you. And by seeking, I mean it is already here now. So we could say, acknowledged, now you abide in the kingdom, which ends the appearance of seeking for the kingdom, to allow these things, and by that I mean the ideal thoughts to be added in mind to then physically appear done for you. Like we discussed in Tuesday's video, which I'll link to in the description. The direct path to the kingdom, which again is not truly a path, as stated in the Bible. I and my Father are one. Acknowledging this releases identification to untrue subconscious beliefs in the moment in relation to appearances, allowing appearances to appear to transform or appear transformed to reflect the true nature of self, which is love, fulfillment, happiness, and bliss. Related to Philippians 4:8, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. So now, ideal thoughts emerge from the all-mind during the silence. And we all know this. We've observed this many times. Our best ideas for artistic expression appear spontaneously as objects in mind first during moments of stillness of mind. Nikola Tesla, for example, one of the greatest inventors, received in his mind's eye his inventions, which he would entertain mentally to imagine them perfectly down to the last detail prior to building them. He once wrote in the Electrical Experimenter, "I am enabled to rapidly develop and perfect a conception without touching anything. When I have gone so far to embody in the invention every possible improvement I can think of, and see no fault anywhere, I put into concrete the product of my brain. Invariably, my device works as I conceived it should. In 20 years, there has not been a single exception." Now he says brain here. It is also key to acknowledge that he also mentioned that the brain acts as a receiver. He said, "The brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists." And as mentioned, we've all experienced this at times where these ideal thoughts emerge from moments of stillness. Perhaps during or after meditations, walks in nature, flow-based activities where the mind is clear from mental chatter, allowing these ideal thoughts to emerge from the silence. So all emerge from the same source, the all, as stated in the Kybalion. The all is mind. The universe is mental. And from this heart of reality, all emerge from. The heart and mind are one. From this heart of reality, ideal thoughts appear in mind, which we witness into what appears as physical things. This is what is meant by thoughts are things. So let's talk about thought forms. Now, the idea of thought forms refers to thought formations, which may be formed consciously, mentally, through intention and set forth for achieving specific outcomes. Also considered similar by some and distinct by others, we have the idea of thought entities, which are also generated in mind and set forth for achieving specific outcomes. We also have the idea of egregore, which results from a group mind by which a thought form is generated or kept alive or built up further by intention or concentration of the group, whether the participants are aware of this formation or not. And this is the key. As you transcend thoughts, no thought form, thought entity, or egregore has any power over you, as only you assign how the power is related to. And by that I mean how the power is believed to appear in mind. An example would be a person experiencing walking into an environment and becoming reactive. If the belief that corresponds to the experience in the environment is no longer identified with, so does the experience in the environment change, and the environment may also appear to change, provided that the specific corresponding belief identified with in mind is brought to awareness and released. So in relation to thought entity, I mentioned once experiencing a traumatic situation as a child from which an inner voice emerged, which I eventually crowned Holy Guardian Angel. More on the idea of Holy Guardian Angel in a video I released this year, which I'll link to in the description. Now on my screen, we see an image from Annie Besant's book, Thought Forms, which she labels peace and protection. It looks similar to the biblical angels depicted as a big eye with wings, sometimes many wings. She said this about the figure. It is not at all probable that in the mind of its creator there existed any thought of its beautiful wing-like shape, though it is possible that some unconscious reflection of faraway lessons of childhood about guardian angels who always hovered over their charges may have had its influence in determining this. The earnest wish undoubtedly clothed itself in this graceful and expansive outline, while the affection that prompted it gave to it its lovely rose color, and the intellect which guided it shone forth like sunlight and its heart and central support. Thus, in sober truth, we make veritable guardian angels who hover over and protect those whom we love, and many unselfish, earnest wish for good produces such a form as this, though all unknown to its creator. So from my experience, thought entities, which may be realized in imagination, with repeated attention and mental engagement, appear more visibly powerful in experiences. For example, one time I was driving in a snowstorm and lost control of the steering wheel, and as the car was sliding, what felt like a presence took control of the steering wheel and steered it right in between the cars, sliding perfectly without an accident. And there was no such tech in that old car I had back in the days that would do this. Now I asked ChatGPT also how it defines a thought entity, in which it said, the idea is that through the power of concentrated mental energy, individuals can give rise to entities with specific qualities, purposes, or characteristics. These entities are seen as products of the mind, often created intentionally for various metaphysical or esoteric purposes. So we know all energy exists now and cannot be destroyed. It can be, however, transmuted through intention into various forms by thought, and all is energy, as Nikola Tesla also said. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Also, another example of thought entity in action is, I shared recently, I did an event in collaboration with the Napoleon Hill Institute, which a few months prior to that, I was in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, in the water, and I picked up a seashell while I was speaking with this inner voice. And also to clarify, for me, this voice doesn't appear as an audible voice in my head, rather an intuitive feeling which I translate into inner speech. Like, for example, speaking with the Invisible Council based on Think and Grow Rich. And I remember saying, you always take care of everything for me. We simply agree upon what's going on to be done, and you move everything around for me behind the scenes. Shortly after a few months, I believe, I was contacted by the Napoleon Hill Institute, and in October I spoke at the retreat that they held in Palmaya House of Aya, just down the beach from the spot where I picked up the seashell. And interestingly, I was asked to speak at the event about the Holy Guardian Angel from The Secret Chapter by Napoleon Hill, which was released when Outwitting the Devil was released. Now, I've also heard many stories over the years since we've been discussing these topics from those that I've connected with from this channel that have experienced related phenomena as a result of thought forms, and some of those stories could even sound unbelievable to some. So we know that the power of mind and thought is beyond measure. As stated in the Hermetica, 2 gifts were bestowed upon humanity. They were mind and speech, and that these 2 gifts were equal to immortality. So thought forms considered imaginal activity generate effects as it is through imagination where the invisible is made visible accordingly. The pearl of great price, as Neville Goddard calls it, which means imagination creates reality. I like to say imagination is reality. Now, interestingly, in Advaita Vedanta, forms which appear to be made of matter are called objects, and even mental phenomena of mind are also referred to as objects. This is to reveal the self, which is beyond the objects. So the self remains unchanged, and the world is experienced differently through what appears as individual minds, from which everyone has different life experiences. Which is why we see some believe in some ideas, and it appears true ideally for them, and others don't believe in those ideas, and life appears accordingly ideally for them. Thus, it is key for peace of mind and harmonious relationships to be understanding and respectful to the various beliefs that others hold as true. I have an autosuggestion I like. I let others be, and they let me be. And so we know only the ideas that are planted in mind externalize. This is also what is meant by thoughts are things. So objects in mind accepted as true appear as outer expressions of life, as Neville Goddard once said in his book, Feeling is the Secret. Consciousness is the cause as well as the substance of the entire world. Now, this could be considered a radical metanoia, a radical outlook of life and how life appears, in comparison to believing that consciousness emerges from matter. Here we're talking about the biblical view, where everything is considered an emanation of God, referring to Joshua 1:3. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that I have given unto you, as I said unto Moses. Prentice Mulford says something similar regarding this, what may be called a radical shift in perspective. He says, when the material mind is put away, or in other words, when we become convinced of the existence of the spiritual forces, and when we learn to use them rightly, for we are now and always have been using them in some way, then to use the words of Paul, faith is swallowed up in victory, and the sting and fear of death is removed. Life becomes then one glorious advance forward from the pleasure of today to the greater pleasure of tomorrow. And the phrase to live means only to enjoy. Now I like how he says, when the material mind is put away, this is referring to Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. It means, do not look to the world of appearances and believe that it is all that exists. Rather, renew the mind by imagining how you'd like it to be, and it appears that way. This is how, as he says, one becomes convinced of the spiritual power, or as stated in Romans 12:2, test and approve what God's will is. He then went on to say, life becomes one glorious advance forward from the pleasure of today to the greater pleasure of tomorrow. And the phrase to live means only to enjoy. To live means only to enjoy. So now, if one can accept that the desired objects appearing in mind are as real as the world made visible through the 5 senses, which was made visible from thought anyways, then they will see those physically appear. So to acknowledge that ideal thoughts are things leaves no wiggle room to doubt what we consciously think, like Nikola Tesla. It is simply to think from the premise of being that way now, like Nikola Tesla did, realizing his imagination is reality. Or as I said in Sunday's video, think feelingly from the premise of already being or having. And by feelingly, I mean feeling it real, or we could say knowing it is real. Again, only ideal thoughts are things. Thus also not fearing thoughts in mind. Thus having a healthy relationship with thoughts and mind. Thoughts and mind are not a problem, unless one believes they are, and I don't recommend that. As you can observe thoughts which are appearing in mind, you don't need to identify with them. For that, I recommend my 7-Day Mental Diet by Emmett Fox video, which I'll link to in the description. So now what we're interested in here is receiving within the ideal thoughts that manifest as ideal things, appearances, experiences, etc. The way to do this is to guard the subconscious from false impressions. This allows us to receive the ideal thoughts from the all mind within, to saturate the subconscious mind. We can call this also thinking ideally for yourself, as he says here. The more you get into the thought current coming from the infinite mind, making yourself more and more a part of that mind, the quicker you are freshened and renewed physically and mentally. You become continually a newer being. Changes for the better come quicker and quicker. The power increases to bring results. You lose gradually all fear, as it is proven more and more to you that when you are in the thought current of infinite good, there's nothing to fear. You realize more and more clearly that there is a great power and force which cares for you. You are wonderstruck at the fact that when your mind is set in the right direction, all material things come to you with very little physical or external effort. And so a good question worth asking yourself is, what is the best way for you personally to guard your subconscious aspect of mind from false impressions? Morning, noon, and night. So you can receive from within the ideal thought current from the all mind, rather than playing out the same not so ideal patterns in this world made visible through the 5 senses, which may include seeking for external confirmation, validation, or approval, subconsciously also, to validate the same not so ideal patterns. And always remember this: the world that appears made visible through the 5 senses has no power over you unless you believe it does. Even if that, it can only appear that way, as all power is within, and all that is made visible was first sourced from within. Thus you have the ability to receive within, and entertain only the thoughts that you would like to see appear as ideal things. John 1:1-3. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say, through my mind made still by acknowledging my true self, ideal thoughts in harmony with how I desire life to appear are received within, to bring forth as invention and artistic expression, which are symbols of my true self. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.